Creators seldom have much say about which of their works develop a popular following. And it was a full 2 years after the hugely successful original production of A Little Night Music that one of the show's more bittersweet songs became a hit. And ever since, the popularity of Send In the Clowns has grown constantly. Today, it's far and away the most famous of Stephen Sondheim's compositions. We're going to hear it in Act 2. But first, we'll get to find out how the song was created. We'll get the inside story from Stephen Sondheim himself, who sat down a while back to talk about the making of a modern standard.
When we cast the show, when I was writing the show, in fact, the part of Desiree had to be played by a woman of glamour, of a certain age. She had to have a talent for light comedy, which is probably the rarest talent in the world. I threw the bulk of the material, the sung material, to Frederick, the man, and to Anne, the daughter, and to Henrik, the son. And add a certain amount to the Count and his wife. And I wrote only one song for Desiree solo in the first act, which is called The Glamorous Life, and a duet, which is mostly her supplying sort of punchlines, and then little bits here and there. There was nothing for her in the second act. When we were in rehearsal, in the second act, Hal called me from rehearsal and said, I'd like you to come down and see the scene between Frederick and Desiree. I had started, in fact, I was at that moment working on a song for Frederick for their confrontation scene in the second act. And Hal said, I would like Desiree to sing in the second act, and it seems to me that's the scene to do it. And I said, it's Frederick's scene. He is the one, he's the antagonist in the scene. She listens, but it's Frederick's scene. It has a long monologue by him, which I was about to turn into a song. Hal said, I've directed the scene to give a little more of the thrust to Desiree. And I went down and saw the way Hal had directed it, and indeed, that's exactly what he had done. Armed with that, and then I went out and had a drink with Hal afterwards, and we discussed what the song might be. I went home and wrote the song. It's one of the quickest I've ever written. I wrote it in 2 days. But it was never meant to be a soaring ballad. It's a song of regret, and it's a song of a lady who is too upset and too angry to speak, meaning to sing, for a very long time. She is furious, but she doesn't want to make a scene in front of Frederick because she recognizes that his obsession with his 18-year-old wife is unbreakable. So she gives up. So it's a song of regret and anger, and therefore fits in with short-breathed phrases.
Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move. Well, I was there. That was.
Okay.
Where are the?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the buddy.
You in midair.
Slight.
Too singing.
It's too long.
Too long.
I don't believe it.
Yes.
I generally write, I develop both lyrics and music at the same time. I generally don't let one get too far ahead of the other, because suddenly you find yourself painted into a corner. You might write a quatrain that you think is just wonderful, and you've only started the first phrase, and then you realize that you can't have the musical language match the lyric language. And vice versa. I don't develop the music too far without having some sense of just sketching and dumbing lyrics of where points are going to land. That's the important thing. It's what points do you want to make? I call them jokes, but it doesn't mean jokes. It means point. It means punch. And that is very much dependent on the rhythm of the music and the energy and the drive of the music. My major starting point with a song is some kind of rhythmic or accompaniment atmosphere. Sometimes it'll start with a line of a lyric like a title, or I'll be making notes, and that will suggest the rhythm of a musical phrase, not necessarily the notes, although the inflection of the phrase will affect the inflection of the notes. And sometimes you just get a melodic idea, but generally they're born together.
That's not good. I should do it in one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
It's the end of the day. I think that's right.
Yeah, but it's right up to there. It's the right feeling. I still think if you took the music out, always would be faster. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yes.
If you approach the song from no singing at all,
yes, that's
and
the
come
secret
to
of it.
singing,
Yes, absolutely.
it's easier. When you approach it from singing the other way, it's harder to get. You get trapped by the melody.
One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move.
When I worked with Leonard Bernstein on West Side Story, one of the things I learned from him was not always necessarily to think in terms of 2, 4, and 8-bar phrases. I was already liberated enough before I met him not to be sticking to 32-bar songs, but I tend to think square. I tend to think it's partly because I was brought up on mid-19th to late 19th century music, and you know it's fairly square. There are not an awful lot of meter changes. You often will shorten or lengthen a bar for rhythmic purposes and for energy. But it's when you switch in the middle, particularly when it's a modest song, when you're not writing an aria, you know, you're writing something like Sweeney Todd where people sing at great length, you expect switches of meter because it helps variety. But in a little 36 or 40 bar song, to switch meters around is almost perverse because the song it doesn't get a chance to establish its own rhythm. But the problem is, what would you do? Would you go, isn't it rich? 2, 3, are we a pair? 2, 3, me here at last in the ground. 3, you in midair. Lenny taught me to think in terms of, do you really need the extra beat or not? Just because you got 4 bars of 4, you come across a bar and it doesn't need the extra beat, then put a bar of 3 in. So what I find, the 9 and 12s that alternate in that song were not so much consciously arrived at as they were by the emotionality of the lyric.
Knowing the one that I wanted was yours.
Right. And it's okay if you take the whole phrase down, you know, a little bit to do what you used to do. It just don't stop on one.
I see.
You know? Or it's so blind I could see.
Just when I stop.
Just when I
You
stop.
need the yellow one.
Opening doors. As long as there's a true line to it.
All right. Okay.
One who can't move.
I get a lot of letters over the years asking what the title means and what the song's about. I never thought it would be in any way esoteric. I wanted to use theatrical imagery in the song because she's an actress. But it's not supposed to be circus. It's supposed to have that circus reference, but it's a theater reference, meaning if the show isn't going, well, let's send in the clown. In other words, let's do the jokes. I always want to know when I'm writing a song what the end is going to be. So Send in the Clowns didn't settle in until I got the notion of don't bother, they're here, which means that we are the fools. And that's the story. I wish I had more to say to you about it. I wrote it in E major. What else do you want to know?